My name is Dashin Grizzly. I am in Pierre, South Dakota, and it is morning for me at 6 p.m. So once again in the daylight, because I'm on a night schedule, and let's talk about extroversion. People who are high in extroversion are more likely to be talkative, social, assertive. They are perhaps the type of people who look towards the future and are optimistic, even though being more extroverted leaves the type of person in a position where they might sacrifice the future for the present. They will be interested in being social butterflies. People who are low in extroversion will probably be more interested in the kind of job that I'm in, where you don't have to socialize too much, instead of a position where you are in sales and have to persuade people or have to do any kind of public speaking whatsoever. Now, this is one of those traits that's like so unbelievably topical. It's one of the things that makes you look at this and say, well, there can't be much to say about extroversion, but it is the twin of neuroticism. It is the other side of the motivational systems. Everything that you run away from in terms of neuroticism is to run away from pain. And whether that be physical or emotional, because they really activate the same centers of the brain, and your body in a lot of ways interprets them in the same way. There are negative consequences for any kind of pain. Be it emotional, be it physical, whatever the case is, your motivational systems are fine-tuned to try to keep you as balanced as possible. But the positive end of that is something that also has to be taken account of. Now, I wanted to talk about Jaak Panksepp's book, Affective Neuroscience, because that is the kind of book that really puts things into perspective and forces you to realize that personality and your temperament is biological. Maybe there are, some environmental factors that you should consider when talking about how somebody became who they are. But that should take a backseat by many orders of magnitude to biology and what we can tell by someone's neuroscientific makeup. I hate it when people say, oh, they're wired differently, but that is just a layman's blanket term to explain something extremely complicated. When you are neurotic, your systems of anxiety, your dopamine, your serotonergic systems, your reaction to things happens on a much smaller level than you realize. It's neurochemical. It is not, oh, I'm feeling anxious. It is a complex biological makeup of what's happening to you. Your neuroticism is biological. Your extroversion is biological, because your motivational systems are fundamentally neuroscientific in scope when you look at them. And they must be given a certain amount of respect in terms of dissecting what makes a person a person. So that being said, let's see where I place. Give it to me, man. You know what I'm saying? Where did I place? Am I low again? This is actually the most ambiguous of the traits as far as how I score on it. Let's take a look. Not bad. 69th overall? Not bad. 64th percentile in enthusiasm. And enthusiasm kind of sounds, exactly like what it is. Your excitability, your need to look at something in a positive outlook, your engagement with other people's, your tendency to laugh. God, I laugh a lot. Some of us exchange voice messages on Facebook. 9 times out of 10, I'm laughing in that motherfucker. Everybody is funny to me. I don't know what it is. I have the propensity to laugh. And it's not even because things are funny. I just find them funny. My sense of enthusiasm is heightened in some aspects of it, but not in others. I am not excitable in the sense that you can get me interested in doing something, but I am excitable in the sense that I like talking to people. I love to laugh. Holy shit, I love to laugh. So there are certain things that I definitely fall on in terms of excitability. There are some things I don't get close to people. I don't have a huge circle around me, even though I've mentioned when I was doing a hook a day for that shout out song that I was pleasantly surprised to see how many people I could mention who were very close to me. But in general, even though my inner circle is bigger than I realize it to be, I am a one-on-one communicator. If you get me around 3 people, I feel like I don't function at the level. If I'm around three people, I'm 3 times as less effective a communicator as I am if I'm one-on-one with somebody. And that kind of transfers back over to my disagreeability, because I'm just not a people person. I'm more interested in things. I like spending time alone, which is kind of an ambiguous feel when I score in the 69th percentile for extroversion, just because I know how disagreeable I am, how I can be alone for long periods of time. I haven't seen a friend in over 2 months, you know? It's not bothering me in any capacity whatsoever. So when I look at these scores, I'm a little bit conflicted, but I completely understand it, because it's almost like a lot of what my personality is performance. And if there's anything that somebody who's excitable will do, it is perform. And I will perform. There are a lot of different traits that have a lot in common with others. And extroversion seems to have so many implications towards how you deal with the other traits, because it's a fundamental motivational system. Now, when I look at how I engage with other people, and I look at how other people engage with me, it seems to be a real telltale sign of where they place. And it's definitely the easiest by which you can meet somebody and within a few minutes tell where they place in a lot of ways. Sometimes people warm up to you, and it takes a little bit longer than others, and they're good with one-on-one conversations. And I would say that falls far more in the lower distribution of extroversion. Whereas somebody who's just friendly right off the bat, right out of the gate, wants to be your friend, and do all the things that friends do together, that's definitely somebody who's a life of the party and higher in extroversion. So when I look at the motivational systems for positivity, for goal-oriented kind of behavior, that would usually load on something like conscientiousness, on orderliness, or industriousness. Probably a combination of both. But when you look at somebody who's really low in extroversion, that goal-oriented side isn't necessarily there, even though, compared to the higher distribution, even though somebody who's lower in extroversion will likely sacrifice the now for the future. Because a lot of risk management is associated with socializing behavior, the kind of things you're willing to give up for going out. Somebody who's extroverted will go out instead of studying, whereas somebody who's introverted will be more inclined to stay in. It's all circumstantial when you boil it down. It depends on the circumstance in question that allows somebody who's less extroverted to sacrifice now for the future, compared to the extrovert who sacrifices the future for now. And there are a litany of different things you could compare and contrast what an extrovert would do that would take time away from the thing they should focus on, instead of an introvert doing something that they would do anyways because they're not interested in the social thing that could take them away from their productivity or their goals, so it wouldn't interfere. So that's just a really quick, probably not quick, I'm kind of long-winded, a breakdown of the specificity in which you have to get with the extroversion trait, because its motivational systems completely change the way in which your other traits manifest themselves. And I think that's extremely important. So yeah, that's enthusiasm. 64th percentile. Not bad. So assertiveness is the kind of thing you would say, oh, a leader would do that. And of course they would. And, you come across somebody who's high in extroversion, specifically in assertiveness, and someone who's high in conscientiousness, especially orderliness, then you've got a fucking manager that'll probably micromanage you, that'll get on your nerves, that'll constantly be asking for progress on shit, but will probably be able to get a lot of shit done. The kind of person who you want in charge of a position like that. Somebody who's assertive will more likely be in positions like that, depending on the traits, of course. Somebody who's assertive on the higher end of the distribution will be the child who is socialized earliest and decides that instead of walking up to a game and realizing, oh, I'm noticing what's happening here, what's happening here, what's happening here, those are the rules. What they do is they get integrated, and then they decide they can change the rules. They are the most confident. They're the type of person who will have the harder conversation. And, that manifests itself very early, and you can tell. You look at a Piagetian model of how kids in particular, realize how games are played, and then integrate themselves into that, and then manifest new ways in which the game is played and change the rules. Assertive people have a lot going for them in this case, because they're the type, let's say you're high in openness and very assertive. That kind of thing is, say you get competent at something, you put in however many hours you need to have a basic fundamental understanding of how something works, and then you can put that out into the world while breaking the fundamental rules without having your craft suffer. In a lot of ways, it's part of what a master would do. A very mastery-oriented kind of trait, because it doesn't just focus on people. The way in which you are assertive does not mean the way in which you approach people. It means the way in which you approach everything, be that things, be that your skills, hobbies, romantic other, and perhaps your future, your goals in general. So it's an all-encompassing thing instead of just people, even though that's how people tend to view it. When we talk about assertiveness, a lot has to be considered, because if you are high in extroversion and your partner is low in extroversion, for example, it will be you, probably, especially if you're high in assertiveness, that's constantly bugging them, saying, we should go out. It's never going to be the introvert's person saying, we should stay in. I want to stay in. It's always going to be the extrovert who is high in assertiveness that pesters their partner, and they're not going to get along, because all you're going to have is a constant battle for how much social activity they should subject themselves to. And the fact that the introvert isn't as sociable as the extrovert isn't going to matter if the extrovert is high in assertiveness. So a lot of things need to be taken into consideration. You don't want to pick somebody or people in general to hang around with you that deviate from where you fall on the personality spectrum, so much so that you find yourself at odds with them all the time, especially if you find yourself in the position of being an agreeable person, because then you're not really conflict oriented and everything feels like stress. Even more so if you're high in agreeableness and high in neuroticism, because you're just gonna be the kind of person who gets disappointed, has some kind of conflict, think it says something more about you than it does, and go down a negative rabbit hole that debilitates you for a certain amount of days. And if somebody who's extroverted and assertive is going after somebody like that, who is agreeable, compassionate towards that person's views, but neurotic, and wants to make them happy while recognizing that they're never going to be happy, and low in extroversion, it's like, wow, you can't describe a worse situation to find yourself in. That's just a bad call. So, this whole series has just been this gateway into looking at people through their behavioral lens that says something about their biology, because it's inherent, and it's something that gosh, we have to take very seriously. We have to take evolutionary biology, behavioral evolution really seriously when we talk about who people are. Otherwise, you end up having some dumb conversation when someone thinks they've asked you a real deep question about nature versus nurture. It's like, what? What? And it gets really annoying. And furthermore, don't think it's a cakewalk to think in these terms. It's hard. It makes you ask a lot of questions. It makes you wonder exactly where the lines are for an individual, where they start, and what their choices mean. Do their choices mean anything? And fundamentally, this whole thing has it's been good to talk about it because it's one of my biggest interests. And talking about, I should have done extraversion first and then neuroticism because it's just a good flipping point, because it's a lot easier to talk about the positives and then reverse engineer negatives out of it than the other way around. At least for me in any case. Maybe that's just personal preference for how I associate ideas. But in general, that has been my Personality 101 series. I'd really like to, in the future, discuss interesting personality combinations. Something like the type of person who would be a hospice nurse. Somebody really high in agreeableness, really low in neuroticism. That combination is really interesting. The type of CEOs who run huge corporate conglomerates. Somebody who's extremely high in openness, particularly industrious, extremely conscientiousness, particularly in industriousness, extremely high in openness to experience, particularly openness, because that way they climb this ladder, they have competence, and then they creatively break the rules to fit into a niche that expands outwards as far as their product is concerned. And there are just so many different combinations that make you think, holy shit, this is possible. That type of human is a real thing. And there is a way in which we can look at them to correspond trait to trait, assign a certain level of intensity for which they fall on it, and then just have our minds blown. So ultimately, this is something I take extremely seriously, something I've devoted hours and hours and hours to understanding, and I'm really interested in the kind of things I come up with next. Maybe I'll take a break from the personality stuff for a while, but I might come back to it. But since I've got a few more days in this month, maybe I'll throw in a character here or two and break them down in terms of the Big 5, Big 10 scale. My name's Dashin Grizzly. I'm in Pierre, South Dakota. This has been fun. There's been a neat little series within a series. It's Inception in April on YouTube. Is this the longest one? I thought I would have the least amount to say about this, but since it has to do with all the other traits, fuck, man.